Hundreds of people are doing unbelievable things in our country, and sometimes they do it under a blanket, almost undercover.
At his peak, Cliff Richard wasn't just famous, he was everywhere. For decades, he stood as one of Britain's biggest stars, the clean-cut icon people trusted, the voice of pure joy and good vibes. He looked untouchable, like nothing could ever shake him. But then, everything flipped fast. In just a few hours, his world came crashing down when he got pulled into the biggest scandal of his life.
Something to do with theatrical, it depends on how your back is. I used to have trouble with the lower part of my back.
What followed was brutal, stressful, and nearly broke him completely. He tried to rebuild, tried to push forward, but deep down, nothing ever hit the same again. Now at 85, never married, no kids, and dealing with a serious health struggle, things are looking rough for the man who once ruled the entire entertainment scene. The spotlight that once loved him now feels a lot colder. Cliff Richard's rise was legendary. Many called him Britain's clean and polished answer to Elvis Presley, and the numbers back that up. He's sold over 250 million records, dropped 68 singles into the UK top 10, and even got knighted by the Queen after dominating for decades. His voice became part of everyday life, something people grew up hearing again and again. But behind all that success, there's a quieter, heavier truth.
I didn't think I'd ever do an album where I'd be singing brand new songs again, because that seemed to be way past me.
The man singing about happiness was living with a kind of loneliness most people never see coming. Cliff Richard was born on October 14, 1940, in northern British India. His father, Roger Oscar Webb, worked managing catering for the Indian Railways, while his mother, Dorothy, raised Cliff and his three sisters, Joan, Jackie, and Donna, holding the family together. At first, life was stable enough for that time, but it didn't last. Everything they had depended on a system that was already starting to fall apart. When India gained independence in 1947, the family faced a tough decision, just like many others: stay and risk everything, or leave and head to a country that didn't really feel like home. They chose to leave, and it wasn't easy. They sold what they could, packed up the rest, and boarded the SS Ranchi for a long 3-week journey to England. But when they arrived, it was nothing like the picture they had in mind. No warm welcome, no big opportunity waiting, just reality hitting hard. Instead of comfort, they ended up in a small semi-detached house in Carshalton, Surrey, staying with Cliff's grandmother. They had gone from a decent life in India to straight-up struggling in post-war Britain. Later, they moved into a cramped 3-bedroom council house in Cheshire, and that's when things got really tough. Cliff shared a room with 2 of his sisters, and money was so tight it changed how they lived day to day. 3 times a week, dinner was just hot tea and toast with sugar. Not a treat, not a choice, just all they had. That was survival, plain and simple. Even with all that pressure, Cliff stayed focused. He went to Cheshunt Secondary Modern School from 1952 to 1957, worked his way into the top stream, and even stayed longer than required to pass his English literature exam. Outside school, he brought that same energy, playing football and even representing Hertfordshire at county level. He wasn't just getting by. He was pushing forward no matter what. But the thing that really pulled him in was music. And not just any music, it was American rock and roll. The sound hit different, raw, loud, full of energy. His parents couldn't stand it, calling it noise, but Cliff heard something else. He heard the future. At just 16, his father finally gave in and bought him a guitar. It wasn't full approval, more like cautious support, but that one move changed everything. That guitar wasn't just an instrument, it was his way out. Not long after leaving school, Cliff took a job as a filing clerk in an electrical factory where his father worked. But let's be real, that job wasn't the dream. It was just a placeholder. Music was always the real goal, and he wasn't letting that go. By 1957, he had already started making moves, forming a vocal harmony group called the Quintones, with a mix of boys and girls, performing covers of popular songs. He also spent a short time with the Dick Teague skiffle group, but that didn't last long. Cliff had bigger plans, so he stepped out and built his own band, calling it the Drifters, not knowing that name would later bring problems. Then came a major shift. On his manager's advice, he dropped Harry Webb and became Cliff Richard, a name that sounded sharper, stronger, and ready for the spotlight. That change wasn't small. It was the start of a whole new identity. His first big performance landed in 1958 at the Regal Ballroom in Ripley, Derbyshire, but the real turning point came on July 24th at Abbey Road Studios. That's where EMI producer Norrie Paramore gave him a shot. The original plan was simple: record Schoolboy Crush as the main track, with Move It sitting quietly on the B-side. But things didn't go as expected. Schoolboy Crush dragged on for nearly 2 hours, while Move It, written by Ian Samwell, came together fast and hit with serious impact. The energy was undeniable, and suddenly that B-side didn't look so small anymore. When Move It dropped, it shot up to number 2 on the UK charts in 1958, and just like that, British rock and roll had its own homegrown star. Cliff wasn't chasing the wave anymore. He was leading it. From there, his success stacked up fast. He became one of the only artists, alongside Elvis Presley, to hit the UK charts across 6 straight decades, with 68 top 10 singles and 14 number ones, including 4 Christmas chart toppers. His record was unreal. But all that success couldn't fix what was quietly off behind the scenes. The clean image, the sharp suits, the polite smile. It all looked perfect on the outside. But his personal life never matched that same level of success. And then came August 2014, the moment everything changed. Cliff was on holiday in Portugal when his world flipped upside down. He turned on the TV and saw police searching his home, live on air. No warning, no call, nothing. He found out at the exact same time as millions of viewers watching helicopters circle above his property. Just like that, decades of reputation took a hit in a matter of hours. And the story behind that shocking moment? It didn't start then. It actually traced all the way back to 1985 at a football stadium in Sheffield, Bramall Lane. The story traces back to Bramall Lane, home of Sheffield United, where a huge event was being held by American evangelist Billy Graham. In that massive crowd sat a teenage boy who years later would come forward with a serious and shocking allegation against Cliff Richard. For a man known worldwide for his clean, family-friendly image, even an accusation like that had the power to shake everything. By the time the claim reached authorities, the Metropolitan Police were already deep into Operation U-Tree, a major investigation launched after the Jimmy Savile scandal. The country was on high alert, and any historical allegation was taken seriously and handled with intense focus. In July 2014, the information was passed to South Yorkshire Police, and from that moment, things started moving fast, whether Cliff knew it or not. Cliff Richard strongly denied the allegation right away and kept denying it consistently over the years. But denial didn't stop what came next. In August 2014, South Yorkshire Police made the decision to search his penthouse apartment in Sunningdale, Berkshire, and that decision would explode into a public storm. Before the search even happened, a BBC journalist named Dan Johnson got wind that something was going on. What followed between the police and the BBC later became a major point of controversy. In court, it was described by some as a deal, even though both sides pushed back on that word. The BBC agreed to hold off on breaking the story early, and in return, South Yorkshire Police tipped them off about the exact timing of the raid. A retired detective superintendent, Matthew Fenwick, later told the High Court he felt pressured into going along with it. According to him, the message was clear: the BBC was going to run the story no matter what. So from the police perspective, cooperating seemed like the only way to control how the news hit the public. That was the reasoning. But from the outside, it didn't look controlled at all. It looked explosive. On the day of the raid, cameras were already in the sky. The BBC aired live footage from a helicopter hovering over Cliff Richard's home, showing officers moving around his property in real time. The coverage was intense, and as human rights lawyer Jeffrey Robertson later compared, it made the situation look like something out of a case involving a bank robber or worse. Meanwhile, Cliff wasn't even there. He was in a hotel room in Portugal, watching it all unfold on TV like everyone else. No warning, no heads up, nothing. Imagine seeing your own home searched live from thousands of miles away. That's how it hit him. And it didn't stop there. After the raid, the BBC even submitted their coverage for the Royal Television Society's Scoop of the Year award. It didn't win, but just the fact it was nominated later became part of the legal fallout. For the next 2 years, the investigation hung over Cliff's life like a shadow that wouldn't go away. Cliff kept denying the allegation the entire time, standing firm while everything played out around him. The Crown Prosecution Service stepped in to review all the evidence, and on June 16, 2016, they made it official. There wasn't enough evidence to bring any charges. Cliff Richard was never arrested, never charged, and the case was closed with nothing proven against him. But by then, the damage had already hit hard. That live raid had been watched by millions. The footage spread everywhere, across countries, across headlines, non-stop. A reputation built over 56 years didn't slowly fade. It took a hit in a single day. So in July 2016, Cliff decided to fight back, filing a lawsuit against both South Yorkshire Police and the BBC. What followed was a long, exhausting legal battle that dragged on for nearly 2 years before finally reaching the High Court. When the case opened in April 2018, it was expected to last 10 days, but the details that came out made it even heavier. Testimonies were tough to hear, and what got revealed about the coordination between the police and the BBC raised serious questions. Then on July 18, 2018, the final decision dropped. And it was big. High Court Judge Anthony Mann ruled that the BBC had violated Cliff Richard's privacy rights, and not just slightly, but in a serious, sensational way that crossed the line. South Yorkshire Police were also found responsible. The court didn't hold back when it came to damages either. Cliff was awarded £190,000 in general damages from the BBC, plus another £20,000 in aggravated damages, partly linked to that controversial Scoop of the Year nomination. The BBC was ordered to cover 65% of the payout, while South Yorkshire Police handled the remaining 35%. And that wasn't all. The police had already agreed to pay him £400,000 in a separate settlement. Later, the BBC added another £850,000 to cover his legal costs, plus £315,000 to reimburse the police for their court expenses. The numbers were huge, but they still didn't fully capture what he lost. Cliff revealed that the entire ordeal had cost him around £3.4 million, factoring in legal fees and missed opportunities. He made it clear his life had been turned upside down, and his global reputation had taken a hit that never needed to happen. He didn't overstate it, but the impact was obvious. A man who had spent decades staying clear of controversy suddenly found himself at the center of one that wasn't even proven. And after that verdict, something changed. He stepped back. Fewer interviews, fewer appearances. The presence that once felt constant in British pop culture slowly started to fade away. After that moment, Cliff Richard didn't just step back. He practically vanished from the public eye. Between August 2014 and June 2016, He went through 22 long months that he later described in court with raw detail, the kind that made it clear the pain never really left him. This wasn't a quick scandal that faded after a few headlines. It dragged on for nearly 2 full years, hanging over him every single day, and by the end of it, the man walking out of the high court wasn't the same person who had once sat in that hotel room in Portugal watching everything unfold on TV. The physical toll showed up first, and people noticed it right away. He lost a lot of weight, not by choice, but because the stress was hitting his body hard. Then came shingles, a painful condition that often appears when someone's been under serious pressure for too long. His system was worn down, and it showed. The mental strain was just as intense, maybe even worse. It was serious enough to be formally recorded in court, and Cliff didn't try to hide it. He admitted there were moments he genuinely thought he might suffer a heart attack or even a stroke. That's how far things had pushed him. But what shook him the most was what he saw in the mirror. He said there were times he looked at his own reflection and barely recognized the person staring back. It felt like he was seeing an older version of himself, someone worn down and changed. For a man who had spent decades in front of crowds, that hit deep. Sleep didn't bring peace either. It made things worse. He would wake up in the middle of the night, stuck in endless loops of thoughts, replaying situations that never even happened and imagining outcomes that never came true. His mind wouldn't switch off, and the stress just kept building. There was always this tight knot in his stomach that refused to go away. No matter how many times he reminded himself that he had done nothing wrong, the feeling stayed. And that's what made it so heavy. He knew he was innocent, but his body and mind didn't get the message. He described that time as if everything he had spent his life building, all the effort to live honestly and stay out of trouble, was being ripped apart in front of him. It wasn't just about the investigation. It was about losing control of his own story. After the raid, he never went back to live in his Sunningdale apartment. In court, he used one specific word to explain it: contaminated. That place no longer felt like home after what happened there on live television. He only returned once just to collect his belongings, and even that was tough. He even compared the experience to being burgled, but said this was worse. At least a burglary doesn't play out on national TV while you're stuck watching it from another country. Stepping away from the public wasn't some calculated move. It was survival, plain and simple. The whole situation delayed an album release and a new version of his autobiography. But those career hits were nothing compared to the deeper impact it had on his life, especially the charitable work that meant so much to him. He made it clear that the fallout didn't just hit his career, it shook his entire life. The non-stop publicity disrupted his personal world, his charity work, and even the plans he had lined up professionally. Nothing was left untouched. It wasn't partial damage, it was total. What made it worse was the constant feeling that people everywhere might now see him as a serious criminal. That thought followed him wherever he went. Every country, every place he had ever visited, it felt like his name had been dragged through the dirt. And that kind of weight doesn't just disappear overnight. Even when the Crown Prosecution Service announced there wasn't enough evidence to charge him, the impact didn't fully reverse. Legally, he was cleared. But not everyone saw that update. Not everyone heard the full story. The helicopter footage, the headlines, the early assumptions. Those stuck with people. By the mid-2000s, Cliff had mostly stepped away from the spotlight. The same attention that once fueled his career had become too much to handle. Fame couldn't protect him anymore. The image he spent decades building, clean, respectful, untouchable, had been shaken in a way that no court ruling could completely fix. He later admitted it would have been easier to just try and forget everything, but instead, he chose to fight back legally, hoping it might stop someone else from going through the same thing. He stood firm on one belief: If a person hasn't been officially charged, their name shouldn't be made public. That stance, shaped by what he went through, has actually influenced changes in UK media law. But even a legal win like that doesn't give someone their peace of mind back. Those 2 years? Gone. The impact? Still there. And as all of this settled, something else became impossible to ignore. Cliff Richard, a global star for decades, had been living a life very different from what most people imagined. Despite massive success, sold-out arenas, and worldwide fame, his personal life told another story. He never married. He never had children. For a man who spent years in front of huge crowds, the quiet he returned to afterward was very real. That silence wasn't just a figure of speech. It was his everyday life. He said many times that this wasn't because he lacked chances. There were women who showed interest, and he's openly admitted that. But he chose not to take that path. And over the years, his reasons have painted a picture of someone who made that decision early, but may have felt it differently later on. One of the biggest reasons he points to is his faith. Cliff became a committed Christian in 1965, and for him, marriage wasn't something casual. He believed it required full dedication, nothing less. And that belief shaped the choices he made, even when those choices came with a cost. Cliff admitted straight up, he didn't believe he could balance a serious relationship with the kind of life he was living. His career had him traveling across the world for months at a time, non-stop schedules, constant movement. Trying to give someone full commitment while living like that. He didn't think it was fair. That idea connected directly to another reason. He always said music came first, touring came first, and he didn't want to pull someone else into that lifestyle if he couldn't fully be there for them. In his mind, it wasn't just about love, it was about responsibility too. Then there was his independence, something he clearly valued. Cliff explained many times that he actually enjoyed living alone. For most of his life, he didn't even feel lonely. He had his space, his routine, his freedom, and that worked for him. There was also a more practical side to his thinking. He didn't want to risk getting married only for it to end in divorce, especially since that clashed with his religious beliefs. In his view, it was better not to marry at all than to take that risk and have it fall apart later. He even said that people often assume marriage is the only path to happiness, and he didn't fully agree with that. He admitted there was always a chance he could meet someone and change his mind, but at the time, he wasn't convinced marriage would actually make his life better. Still, the public never stopped asking questions. His decision to stay single for so long led to constant speculation about his personal life. People kept trying to label his sexuality, something he always brushed off as irrelevant. To him, it simply wasn't anyone else's business. He stayed firm on that, saying his private life belonged to him and that he had lived happily without following the usual path. But there was one woman he openly admitted he truly loved. And that was Olivia Newton-John. Back in the 1970s, he fell for the singer and actress, but timing didn't work in his favor. She was already committed to someone else, and he later admitted he lost the chance. She saw him as a close friend, nothing more. She went on to marry twice, including one marriage to his own close friend, Bruce Welch. Still, Cliff stayed close to her throughout her life and was reportedly there near the end. That connection clearly meant a lot to him. There were other relationships too. He was involved with Australian dancer Delia Wicks and was also linked to actress Una Stubbs. By his own words, his love life had its moments, but none of those relationships led to marriage or children. Then there was Sue Barker, a former French Open champion who later became a BBC broadcaster. Their relationship started in the 1970s when both were at their peak. It shifted over time from something romantic into a strong, lasting friendship. But again, it didn't turn into marriage. Sue Barker eventually married someone else, while Cliff stayed focused on his career. And later on, he admitted something more personal than ever before. He said there were times he wondered if he would never truly be loved because of the life he chose. After the applause faded and the crowds disappeared, he would come home to silence. And in those quiet moments, he couldn't help but question if he had missed out on something real, something meaningful. He later made it clear. He wasn't talking about romantic love. He had experienced that before. What he meant was something deeper, something more constant. Family, a shared life, someone there every single day. He doesn't regret the career, not at all. The music, the success, the journey, that all meant something real to him. But there are still quiet evenings where his thoughts drift, moments where he wonders what it might have been like to have someone beside him, not for the spotlight, not for the fame, but just for the silence. Now at 85, the way Cliff Richard lives might catch people off guard. You'd expect someone who sold over 250 million records, who spent decades in front of massive crowds, to be living some grand, visible retirement. But that's not his reality. Cliff still lives the way he always has. Low-key, private, and mostly on his own. No constant spotlight, no big public lifestyle, just quiet days, away from the noise that once defined his life. But time doesn't stand still, and the same body that carried him through over 60 years of performing is starting to slow down. Even he has admitted he doesn't know how many more times he'll step onto a stage again. Then came a moment that changed everything. In late 2024, during a routine insurance check ahead of a planned tour, doctors found prostate cancer. It wasn't something he even asked to check for. It was part of paperwork required by promoters. And that routine step ended up revealing something serious that could have gone unnoticed. The good news? It was caught early. Doctors told him the cancer hadn't spread, which made all the difference. Then on December 15, 2025, he appeared on Good Morning Britain and shared that the cancer was gone. But he didn't celebrate in a big, dramatic way. There was no over-the-top relief. Instead, he spoke carefully, almost cautiously, saying he couldn't be sure it wouldn't return. Because the truth is, nobody can promise that. He used that moment to say something important. He urged people to get tested, to not ignore their health. It didn't sound like a typical message. It sounded personal, like it came from someone who had seen how close things can get. Fans have also started noticing changes, and they're hard to miss. At a show in Brighton Centre on December 4, 2025, people watching closely saw the difference. He didn't move around the stage like he used to, and when he spoke, his voice sounded weaker. But then something surprising happened. When he started singing, that voice was still there. Strong, clear, almost untouched. It confused people, impressed them, and reminded everyone of who he has always been. Cliff has made one thing very clear, though. There's a difference between stopping and retiring. And to him, that difference means everything. It's not just about leaving the stage. It's about holding on to a part of himself that he's not ready to let go of. Cliff has been honest about one thing. He doesn't know if he'll ever truly retire. To him, that word feels heavy, like a door slamming shut for good, locked with no way back. But stopping, that's different. Stopping just means taking a break, knowing he could return anytime he wants. In his mind, if he ever felt ready again, he could simply pick up the phone, call his team, and book a few nights at the Royal Albert Hall. And if the venue was open, he'd be right back on stage singing like nothing ever changed. That's why retirement isn't really part of his vocabulary. Stopping feels flexible, something he can control. And that mindset has helped him keep going without feeling like every performance might be his last, even though deep down he knows time is starting to catch up. In July 2025, a reporter asked him directly if his Australian tour would be his farewell. His answer? Straight to the point. He said he didn't know. He even admitted he doesn't think about it anymore. No big speeches, no dramatic plans, just taking things as they come. He did acknowledge reality, though. As he gets older, performing will naturally become harder, but he refuses to guess when it will end. He's not putting a date on something that still means so much to him. One thing he does admit is that touring won't last forever. The constant travel, the hotels, the late nights, the time zone changes. It all adds up. Each flight takes a little more energy than the last, and it's becoming harder to recover like he used to. He's also noticed something new, unpredictability in his voice. For a man who sang confidently for decades without worrying, that's a big shift. Still, despite all of that, his excitement hasn't disappeared one bit. He said it himself. He feels the same thrill now as he did the first time he performed in places like Australia and New Zealand. That spark is still there. The only difference is his body doesn't move as fast as his passion anymore. In December 2025, he wrapped up his Can't Stop Me Now tour at the Royal Albert Hall in London. The title sounded bold, almost defiant, and in many ways, it was. But it also carried a deeper meaning, because the truth is, Cliff Richard has been tested again and again by public controversy, legal battles, aging, and even cancer. And yet he keeps getting back up, not because it's easy, but because he's not ready to sit down for good just yet. He's sold over 250 million records, but times have changed. New generations have moved on to different sounds, different stars. And now, the stage is the one place where his legacy still comes alive in real time. That's why he keeps stepping out there, even when his legs feel heavy and his speaking voice sounds weaker. Because when the music starts, that part of him still shines. Once he was known as Britain's most famous bachelor, surrounded by mystery and constant speculation. Now, he's simply an older man living quietly, stepping into the spotlight when he can, and seeing just how far he can keep going. So what do you think? Should Cliff Richard retire or keep going as long as he's able? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video so more people can see it.